Great. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a real joy, actually, to be with you here this morning. And so thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And thank you, Tim and Anya, for inviting me today. And I think that every now and then, there are moments in life when you just kind of see God's kindness in what he's doing. And I think, genuinely, God's been really kind in bringing Tim's friendship into my life. And I think that I've never had a more energetic, life-filled, positive, encouraging friend than Tim. And so, he's added much to my life in that short time that we've been getting to know each other and getting to know each other better and working together. And it's really exciting what God's doing across the East Anglian region. And so, Tim is a real life-giving friend. And so it's a real joy for me to be able to be invited by him here today and to be with you guys. And as Tim said, I'd just love to share a little bit of his invitation, some thoughts with you this morning, really, around discipleship. And I know it's a journey that God is going to be taking you on as a church. And it's one, actually, that for us, we actually began around 3 years ago. As a church family, we just came to a place where we said we wanted to revisit and rethink what discipleship really looked like for us. And I was inspired by a talk by a friend, and he was talking about this crack that had developed in his house. And it had come in his lounge in quite a sizable crack. And so they investigated into what was going on and got some professional advice, etc., of course, and found that they had subsidence. And so he said at that point in time, of course, when you hear you've got subsidence, you think, gosh, like, what are we going to do? We're going to have to kind of knock the house down, or, what's going to be the solution to this? And he said that, of course, the solution wasn't to just kind of paper over the cracks, if you like, and try and fill it and ignore it. He said, nor was the solution to kind of knock it down, but the professional advice was to put a raft in, to shore up the foundations, to make the foundations stronger, to be able to address that. And then he said this, he said, I think in the church in the UK, and he meant across the board, he said, I think we're realizing that there's something of a crack in our discipleship. And then he said, but the solution to that isn't that we want to kind of just paper over it and ignore it, because that's a problem. He said, but nor is the solution that we need to knock the whole house down. And what he meant by that is there's so much in the church that's really good. So it's not like you want to just knock the whole house down, because there's lots of really great things that we do as a church. But we do recognize that perhaps there's some areas where we need to shore up some of our foundations, and discipleship being one of them. And so I feel that really spoke to kind of where we're at. And we just recognize for us, there's a bit of a crack in our discipleship. And so what does it look like for us to go on a journey now and just ask God, really, how do we get back to what being a disciple is? And what does that look like? What does discipleship look like? And so that's a little bit of the journey we'll go on together today. We're just going to rethink and revisit this whole thing. What does it mean to be a disciple? And in its purest form, what does it look like to get back to what Jesus meant for it to look like? And so I guess what I will speak from a little bit today is some of what we've learned along the way, but by no means from a point of hey guys, we've nailed it, so let me tell you all about discipleship. We are still learning. And how many people know that sometimes you learn as much about how not to do it as how to do it when you go on these journeys? And so I'll share a few thoughts from that with you guys today. But I believe 100% that discipleship is something that we want to do, and I believe it's something that we want to do better. And so let me share a little thoughts with you around that today. And so let's go right back initially, just about what it means to be a disciple. What is a disciple in the context of Scripture? And we'll know, and maybe I'm just reminding you today that it's a word that we associate with a rabbi or a teacher, as it were. A word known to associate with them, and a rabbi being held in really high regard. And a rabbi would carry his yoke, his set of teachings, with him everywhere he went. As he carried his yoke, his set of teachings from the Torah, the Bible of the day, he'd invite people as a rabbi to come follow me. It was an invitation, come and be a disciple, come and follow me. And in first century times, as a Jew, if you were to get that invitation from a rabbi, from a teacher, that invitation to come and follow me and learn from me, it was like the absolute pinnacle. It was like kind of like, wow, to receive an invitation like that. Because the first century kind of Jewish education system was structured quite interestingly. And if you can just trek with me for a little bit, and this is where some of the John Mark Comer stuff has been so helpful, and I really recommend that book that Tim has talked about there, and I'm going to share some things from that today. But he kind of just dives a little bit into the Jewish education system of the day to help you to understand how special it was really to receive the invitation to be a disciple. And so at level 1, there were 3 levels in the Jewish education system. At level 1, everyone entered what was known as Beit Sefer. Okay, it was the house of the book, it was called. It was a bit like primary school, I guess, except in this primary school, you had to learn and memorize everything from Genesis to Deuteronomy. You know, kids think they've got it hard these days. Imagine that. By the age of 12, you've memorized everything from Genesis to Deuteronomy. You've been diving into and learning and understanding the Torah, as well as, of course, your maths, and you're learning how to read and write and memorize, etc. But at the age of 12, you're classed as an adult, and then it's kind of like, now this is where most people finish their education. But the best of the best from level 1 move into level 2. And level 2 was called Beit Talmud, and it was called the House of the Learning. It was a full-time school, if you like, that existed beside the synagogue with a paid teacher for those who were kind of age 12 up to about 14 or 15. And there you didn't just learn Genesis to Deuteronomy. Now you're deep diving into the whole Old Testament. You're learning all the law. You're learning all the traditions. And to be invited to level 2 was like, wow. But by the time you've reached age 14 or 15, most people, pretty much everyone at that point in time, is now done with their education, apart from a few, a select few, an elite few, a best of the best again, if you like. And the best of the best are invited to become what's called a Talmudim. And a Talmudim was to become a disciple of a rabbi. And that word Talmudim is a Hebrew word. It means disciple, follower, student, or apprentice. And this third level's like crazy hard to get into. Only the elite receive that invitation. You'd be grilled by a rabbi, a deep dive into your level of understanding. He wanted to know if you were smart enough, if you were talented enough, if you had a work ethic of what it would take to one day potentially become a rabbi, a teacher, yourself. And if he was satisfied that I think that this person has got something about them, he would make you an invitation. He would turn to you and just simply say something like this: come and follow me. Come and follow me. Come and be one of my disciples. And the best word really to explain that word Talmudim is this word apprentice. It was an invitation to apprentice under a rabbi, to follow and become an apprentice. Now, having just loaded you with the first century context of the Jewish education system, just hold that in your mind and carry that now into Jesus' words in Mark chapter 1, verse 16 to 20. Subtitled, Jesus Calls the First Disciples. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, follow me. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in the boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. Fast forward to Mark chapter 8, verse 34 to 37. It says, and calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, Jesus said to them, now this is where it got revolutionary. If anyone, hang on a second, Jesus. Our understanding is this is an invitation to the select and to the few and to the elite of the elite. And now Jesus stands to his feet and says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For only the elite? No, Jesus says, for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? The first time Jesus ever stands and calls people to himself, it's this invitation that people in that day, they knew it was an invitation of a rabbi to people saying, come and apprentice under me. And Jesus' invitation is, come, follow me, come be my apprentice. And that's why as we read through the Gospels, let me just backtrack there for a moment. I wonder if I said to you, give me one word to describe Jesus. How many people would say rabbi or teacher? Not many, not many. Yet in the four Gospels, it's about 90 times when people talk to Jesus that we find that. About 60 times he's called rabbi or teacher. He's known to be this brilliant young rabbi. And now he's starting to call followers. Nowadays when we talk about followers, we think about Instagram. You know, I've got 300 followers. But then a follower meant something entirely different. It meant to apprentice. It meant to come alongside. It literally meant if someone said to you, are you a follower of Jesus? They meant, are you his disciple? Are you his apprentice? Are you apprenticing under him? And Jesus is ripping the rule book up because in a world that says this invitation is for the select, for the elite, for the few, Jesus stands to his feet and literally says, anyone and whoever. It's really hard to actually put yourself in how revolutionary that really was in that day. That was radical stuff. To hear a rabbi make this kind of invitation. Anyone and whoever can apprentice under me. For a top rabbi to stand in front of people and say, it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you've come from, doesn't matter what you think you have done or you haven't done, doesn't matter if you feel smart enough or not smart enough, whether you feel you might have the work ethic or not, or the drive, or your act together, doesn't matter. Whether you're a man or a woman, which was revolutionary in those days, of course, as well. He says, you're invited here and now to follow me. You can only imagine people's just like jaws are on the ground at this point in time. And what it means to follow Jesus is to be a disciple. I know we'll say, I'm a Christian. But actually that word Christian is only used 3 times in the New Testament. But 268 times the word disciple is used. I wonder how many of us would say, I'm a disciple. I'm an apprentice of Jesus. I'm a follower. I'm a Talmudim. His primary call upon my life is to follow him. Dallas Willard says the greatest issue facing the world today, with all its heartbreaking needs, is whether those who are identified as Christians will become disciples, students, apprentices, practitioners of Jesus Christ, steadily learning from him how to live the life of the kingdom of heaven into every corner of human existence. And every rabbi had 3 goals. We won't dive into all of them today. You can read the book. You can unpack these more in your own time. But 3 goals were simply this: to be with your rabbi, to become like your rabbi, and to do what your rabbi did. So to be with your rabbi, to literally learn at his side, to follow him everywhere he went, to learn as much as you could by following him. To become like your rabbi, well, one day to become a teacher too. One day to be able to invite other people. Hey, why don't you come and apprentice with me? Let me teach you. Let me help you learn how to live this life. And thirdly, to do what your rabbi did, which is to one day, as I just said, go and make disciples yourself. And John Mark Comer says to follow Jesus, to apprentice under Jesus the rabbi, means ordering our life around these 3 goals. Tim said them to us earlier on. It's to be with Jesus, it's to become like Jesus, and it's to do what Jesus did. But I just was really struck when we dived into this as a church family. Where this led us was just this whole principle of just this strong emphasis of learning alongside. Learning alongside Jesus. You know, a disciple would, as he gathered his small group together, if you would learn alongside your rabbi, but alongside one another. And that's what captivated us as a church, because you know, doing what your rabbi did and, you know, becoming like him and doing what he did, that sounds exciting. It sounds like that's this level I want to get to. I want to become like him. I want to do what he did. But level 1 required this something of a commitment, this commitment to learn alongside him, this commitment to learn alongside others. And what struck me as I looked at the kind of 3 levels of the Jewish education system was this ever-increasing sense of proximity. So at like level 1, it's huge. There's like everyone's involved at level 1, but at the end of level 2, many leave that and the group gets smaller. And then at level 2, as that journey through to the end of level 2, then many leave that and it gets smaller. And it seemed to me that there's something intentional about the rabbi bringing it right down to a small group of people. This ever-increasing sense of proximity, a smaller group of followers who follow the rabbi and go alongside each other. And so as we read through the New Testament, we see Jesus drawing crowds, but we see Jesus doing discipleship alongside a few. Friends, I want to see crowds drawn, but ultimately discipleship is effective in the journey of a few. We want to draw crowds, but we can't really disciple. I love Sunday mornings, but I tell you what, Sunday mornings are not discipleship-making environments. There's a limit to what we can do on a Sunday. You know, even in our church, you know, and we're not a massive church by any stretch of the imagination, but there are Sundays when I'll go home and I'll say to Claire, I didn't see so-and-so today. And she'll say, yeah, they were there. I go, oh, no. Didn't see them. You know, and a couple of hundred people, and you start missing people. And you're thinking, is this really what Jesus wants? And so for us, we were unpacking, how do we do this better? Because yes, we want to draw a crowd, but we want to see each other. We want to learn alongside each other. We want to be with him. And Jesus is teaching us that shaping lives and seeing people grow is effective on a journey of a few. So he's gathering crowds and preaching to them, but then he says, here's the value of the small, the relational, and ultimately the transformational when it comes to discipleship. Now, we have a guy in our church. He's a successful businessman. He's one of those guys that he could sell ice to Eskimos. He's that kind of guy. He can just set up a business and do really well. Real entrepreneur. And when I first met him, his wife had been in church for a long time. John wasn't saved. And then John came to Christ. And when John came to Christ, he was running a big window fitting making factory. He had a big unit, high level of staff, numbers-wise, and he was making all his own windows and doors and conservatories. He had vans that were going out and fitting windows and doors and conservatories. He had a big house. He had a really nice car. And he had all these things. But he said this, that the bigger things got, the harder they got. He found that as his business grew, and the problem was this, that as his business grew, he found he could spend less and less time with the staff. When it was smaller, he could invest his values, his heart, his vision into them, and they kind of got it and went and lived it out. But he said as the business grew, he had less time to spend with the ever-increasing workforce, and so they didn't have his heart, they didn't have his vision, they didn't have his values. And do you know what started happening? Some of them started doing things, the standard of work started to slip. Some of them started doing things where they started to do little sideline jobs and set their own little kind of thing. And it all began to lose track. And he got incredibly stressed out with it. And he got to this point where he just sold the whole business up. Sold it up and got out. He got ripped off by someone who was working for him. He just thought, I'm out, I'm done. And so he quit that. And so he decided, I'm just going to start a small garage because he loves cars. He restores cars. So he started a small garage. But then the garage and the car business started to grow because he was good at this stuff. And so as it grew, then it was like, well, I'm not just going to fix cars, I'm going to sell cars. So he starts, and of course happens, the business starts to grow, the reputation increases, and then one day, because his staff's increasing and he's not getting the time to teach them how to do everything the way he would do it, one day a customer drives off and the wheel flies off their car as they leave the garage, and one of his members of staff hadn't tightened the wheel nut properly, hadn't done it right. And he thought, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, it's getting too big, it's getting too stressful. So he sold that business up and he bought himself one van, he called himself the window repairman, and he just drove around as a one-man band in his little van. He started going, he's really good. I can testify to that because he's fixed our windows and doors on many occasions. And he lives at the end of my road, which is great. So he's really good at what he does. And so he started to do it. And then he's got a young son, Johnny. And he invited Johnny into the business with him. And Johnny just literally was a young lad, and he just sat beside his dad, and he went everywhere in that van with his dad, learning to do what his dad knew to do. And his dad imparted that skill, that vision, those values, that work ethic, that understanding into him. And then eventually, do you know what happened? Johnny got his own van. The window repairman now has 2 vans. But the interesting thing is this, that his son in his work carries the same values, the same standards, gets the same type of feedback, and the same kind of reviews. And the difference was this, my son became my apprentice. We spent that time. He learned in close proximity at my side. And it's a modern day picture of exactly what Jesus intends. The big is great, but it's harder. We can do it most effectively alongside a few. Sunday mornings are great, but Jesus teaches us a value of small, relational, and transformational. So when Jesus says, hey, come follow me, Jesus wasn't saying, just come with me. Actually, the word he used there in the Greek, it actually means come close to me. Come close. And so he calls 12 people and he says, your primary call upon your life is to be close to me. I pray we never forget that. Sometimes I can get so caught up in everything else. I have to bring myself right back to that and center myself again in the fact that the primary call upon my life is to be with Jesus, to come close to him. To come close to him, but then also to come close to each other. And Jesus says, if you do that, he says, I will make you fishers of men. He says, I'm going to do something in your life as you live that life close to me and close to one another. I'm going to make you. It means I'm going to shape you and change you and fashion and create you. And so he's going to shape and change and fashion us to become more like him. And that's the heart of discipleship. It's not that Jesus wants to tweak our life, friends. It's that Jesus wants to do his work of transformation in our life. He wants us to become more like him. We might have called it sanctification once upon a time. People often tend to call it spiritual formation these days. But 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18 says, and we all with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed, not tweaked, are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. And so Dallas Willard says, spiritual formation in the Christian tradition is a process of increasingly being possessed and permeated by the character traits of Jesus as we walk in the easy yoke of discipleship with Jesus, our teacher. That's what this life's about, becoming more like him. But yet I learn it only becomes possible when I position myself close to him and close to others. Ultimately, an apprentice is shaped by the one who is teaching them, be that good or bad. So we're all being influenced, we're all being shaped by something or someone. And so I'd love to just center some of my closing thoughts around 4 major things that they say influence and shape our lives. And so the first thing is this, just simply the stories we believe. I'm hoping my PowerPoint will work for me in this moment, but the stories we believe, they shape our life. What we believe about what we believe to be right, what we believe to be wrong, you know, who we are, how to behave, what we believe about ourselves, what our views are, they shape our lives. Our habits, the things we do, they do something to us. They shape our desires and our passions and our will and our emotions. The third thing is relationships, and I'm kind of speaking into that today. But we know that we become like the people we hang out with. We pick up views. We pick up behavior. With my son right now, I'm seeing a huge transformation in his life as a 14-year-old. You know, at school with the language he uses, I don't mean like bad language, by the way. I just mean he's using words I ain't even got a clue what they mean. Literally. He comes out with words the other day, and, he was talking about someone was praising someone else, and he said to me, he says, "Oh, Dad," he says, they were glossing them. I'm like, what? They were doing what? He says, "They were glossing them, Dad." And I'm like, what does that mean? He means they're like praising them up, like gloss. I thought, oh, okay, glossing them up. Thank you for the interpretation, son. His interests are changing. Right now, all his mates are getting into golf, and it's like now he's like on me all the time. He's like, "Dad, can you get me some golf clubs? Can you get me some golf clubs?" Because he got a few mates who played golf. He went for a game. Now he wants to play golf. His clothes are now changing as well. This big interest all of a sudden in fashion, and coming to me and Claire and sort of saying, "Can I have this pair of shorts?" And you're like looking at the price, and you're like, "No, you cannot." By the way, apparently what clothes you now wear is called your drip. Daddy's got great drip. He's got what? He's got great drip. What does that mean? Clothes, fashion sense, style. Of course it does. He's using kind of, aftershaves, and every time he goes for a haircut, I can't even take him in the barbers now, because every time I take him for a haircut, he's found a new picture of how he wants him to cut his hair. I just say to him, "You can go in on your own now, mate, because that poor guy gets a different picture every time you come to him." I just go around Tesco's while he goes in and gets his hair cut. I see all this change in him. And then I realize that, like, some of these words that he uses, I start picking them up. And I realize as 44 years of age, it's not cool to use these words. I really learned an incredibly hard lesson just a couple of months ago, because I don't know if you know this, but if something's good, it's banging, okay? Now, there you go, a few of you knew that one. So it's banging, it means it's good. Well, there was banging this and banging that, and you just start to pick it up. You just get it. And my son plays football. We go all over the place. He's always, on Saturdays, we're usually in and around the West Midlands, traveling all over the place with his football. And he's got a great group of mates, and I've got a great bunch of friends who kind of, on the sidelines as well, dads as well. And every time we're at training together, at the end of training, the conversation is standard. And the end of the conversation, at the end of the night, it's always, "What's for tea?" Right? That's the classic thing. It happens among the dads. It happens among the kids as everyone's coming off the pitch, because my 14-year-old son lives in a state of being permanently starving. And so as he comes off the pitch, "I'm starving, what's for tea?" And all the boys are like, "What's for tea? What's for tea? What's for tea?" And everyone's comparing what their dinners are and everything like that. Well, the other day we were all together, and we were coming down some steps. They'd had like a little classroom session, and as we're coming down the steps, the conversation breaks out, "What's for tea?" And on this particular night, my wife had really pulled it out the bag, because she was doing a midweek roast, and I thought, a midweek roast? I'm like, this really is banging, so I can really proudly say what my midweek dinner is tonight in front of everyone. Sometimes when it's just a jacket potato or something, I'm not so, but a midweek roast. And so as we're coming down the stairs, little Larky turns around, and he says to everyone, "What's for tea?" And I said, "It's a midweek roast." And they were like, "Whoa." And I went, "Larky," "It is banging," like this, in front of everyone. And Larky just stops on the stairs in front of all the parents, all the children, and he turns to me and he says, "Daryl, I don't ever want to hear you use that word again." Man, I'm not as cool as I thought I used to be. Jake literally was the face of disappointment. I felt like, like when you have kids and you want to tell them off, and you're like, "Just you wait till you get back to the car." I felt like I was on the other side of that. When I got back to the car, he let me have it. He was not happy. He said, "Dad, that was so embarrassing. Please don't ever do that again." So we get shaped by our relationships. We get shaped by the environment we live in, the society, family, friendship circles, digital influences, all these things that we live amongst. Now, not all of them are bad. Some of them can be positive in and of themselves, but some we recognize they're not very helpful, and they're not very healthy in shaping us to become more like Jesus. So what do I do in the face of all these things that apparently the four primary things that influence my life? Well, I intentionally offset them according to what God teaches me. The information that God gives me, the transformation that God wants for my life comes by allowing his influence in my life. So instead of just the stories we believe, now I'm bringing myself under his teaching. I'm learning the truth of who God is and who God says I am. what he says about our world, what he says about my purpose. I expose and counter lies with God's truth. We need to read his word. We need to learn what it means to live it out in daily life. Secondly, instead of habits just shaping my life, I believe in practice. Matthew chapters 5 to 7, the Beatitudes and all where Jesus teaches us there, the Sermon on the Mount, the pattern to go and live out this Christian life. To live it out and practice it, and it's a lifetime of learning and doing. Well, relationships. Well, I understand the power then of community. But not just any kind of community. What kind of community? I understand I'm being transformed and shaped by community. Well, who are the right people around me who are going to shape my life in a good way? How many people know we can't follow Jesus alone? It's not good for man to be alone. It doesn't happen well in isolation. So I'd like you to have a little look around this morning at those who are sitting around you. And I want to say to you today, whether you like it or not, God has chosen these people to shape your life to become more like Jesus. And you know what? That might just include in the area of patience. Because how many people know community brings out the best in us, but sometimes it brings out the worst in us? It exposes our struggles and our flaws when we rub up and rub shoulders with other people. But yet somehow it's the place I find encouragement and support and I'm built up. And so disciples, they understand church is family, not a business. And family is like that. I don't know about you, but it's not always bliss and peace and angels singing in our household. Because that's not what family's like. Family has flaws, but love covers a multitude of those things. Milton Jones says, when it works, church is like Lego. Accommodating each other's knobbly bits makes us all stick together. It's really good. And so Jesus places this value upon small relational transformation. I'm bringing it into land now. And for us as a church, this has been huge for us. It's been huge for us because it's really reshaped the way that we have thought around our small midweek groups. We have done cell groups, we have done DBS groups, now we just call them life groups. There's nothing new in that. Plenty of churches call their midweek stuff life groups. But we just revisited this small, relational, transformational aspect. And we've tried so many things with our groups over the years. I mean, we've done just about everything that I could think of. The latest fad, the latest craze. It was just, thrown so many efforts and energy, so much time, effort and energy at these things, but nothing really stuck. And then we came upon this stuff, and we came upon this idea of being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, doing what Jesus did. And what does that mean for us as a church? Well, just to say this, that we prioritize that. And in prioritizing that, and I don't say this to in a boastful way, but we now exist as a church whereby we've actually had a waiting list for people to get into small groups because we haven't been able to keep up with the amount of people who wanted to buy in, because our small groups, we started them, they started working well, lives were being changed, and all of a sudden more and more people were wanting to come. The other day they gave me the figures, and I was just really blessed. I was really blown away. We have a huge percentage of our church now committed to small relational transformational life. And I really, really love that. Sometimes, friends, people just think that church growth is numerical. Of course, we want to celebrate that. But let me tell you, there's a lot more to church growth than just numbers. It's about people's spiritual growth and people's spiritual development. And so I was really thrilled to hear that such a high percentage of people are understanding small, relational, and transformational. They're the best they've ever been. Right now, we just launched 2 new groups, and within a week, we'd filled them. Thank God, there's people who want to get in, who are getting it. Because people understand that it's being close to Jesus, it's being close to each other. Proximity, value in that. James Murray says, disciples move from consuming to contributing, from spectators to servants, from fans to followers of Jesus. A healthy discipleship culture is built when believers commit not only to Christ, but also to his body. And lastly, Holy Spirit environments. The environment we want to be in is where the presence of God is. That's where we want to position ourselves. It's what we want to commit to. Valuing and prizing being in his presence, at home, on our own, in the car, in the shower, at church, in small groups, all those places. You know, just in my own personal life, I was very challenged just recently I was listening to a guy who was talking about this thing called RPMs. This is not in my note, but this is not, it's something that's been going for a little while, and it's basically a checkup on how you're doing relationally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And you look at those 4 things in your life. And he just said that in his life he had felt that he had lost something about just spending time speaking in tongues. And I was just really quite challenged by that. And I just committed myself to 1 journey a day when I'm in my car, because I'm in my car a lot. I thought, I think I've lost something about this. And 1 journey a day, I've just been trying to take time. When I say a journey a day, I mean it takes me about 15 minutes to get into town. I don't want you to think it's like 2-3 hour journey or something. But it's really, really making a change. Really making a change. And in the context of community, when we talk about the presence of God, I'll just remind you as I bring this now to a close, what Jesus promised in Matthew 18, verse 20. Where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. So the way to become more like Jesus is a lifetime of intentional discipleship in closeness with him and in closeness of community. So James Murray says, true discipleship is never forced, it's invited and embraced. Jesus never coerced anyone to follow him, simply just said, come, follow me, left the choice in their hands. A willing heart is essential because discipleship demands surrender, humility, and teachability. Just leave that last screen up that just says discipleship requires willingness. You may want to screenshot that for your own reference. But Jesus invites us. He says, come, follow me. But it's up to you and it's up to me to willingly respond. The invitation is out, but we have to respond. We are SVP. How do we respond? To be with him, to become like him, to do what he did. I willingly position myself close to him by coming under his teaching, learning to live it out in practice, committing to community, big and small, being in the presence of God and encountering him. Amen. Amen.